There is this really pervasive narrative just echoing around boardrooms and sales floors right now.
Absolutely. You hear it everywhere.
Right. You hear it in quarterly reviews. You read it in those long LinkedIn think pieces. And usually boils down to a heavy sigh and this singular complaint of, well, sales is just getting harder.
Yeah, the classic excuse.
Exactly. It's usually the preamble to some directive demanding everyone just, double their call volume or send more emails, just push harder. But if you actually dissect the data, if you really examine the mechanics of what's happening inside enterprise organizations today, that foundational statement it's entirely flawed.
It really is.
Sales didn't get harder. It got infinitely more complex. I'm Jeremy, and alongside me is Sarah, and we are with the Altify team.
And, that distinction between harder and more complex, it isn't just semantics. It completely alters how you attempt to solve the problem.
Welcome to this deep dive into Altify's category-defining solution for strategic revenue execution, or SRE.
Which is a huge topic.
It is. Our mission today is to unpack the research we've compiled and explore exactly why that old philosophy of activity automatically driving outcomes, why that has totally collapsed.
Right, because we are going to examine how modern revenue teams are attempting to close this massive gap, the gap between the pristine strategy created in the boardroom and the absolute chaotic day-to-day reality of execution out in the field.
Yeah, to understand why we need a completely new operating system, we first really need to look at the mechanics of why the old system broke down. Let's look back at what we could call the primitive era of B2B sales.
The good old days, right?
The good old days. For decades, the formula was essentially linear math. More dials equaled more conversations. More conversations organically spun up more meetings, which created a fatter pipeline. And a fatter pipeline, by sheer probability, yielded more revenue.
Yeah, it was truly a volume game, and momentum was kind of the ultimate currency.
Exactly.
But it was a volume game because the environment permitted it to be. I mean, in that era, buying decisions were structurally pretty simple.
All right, like who were you actually talking to?
Usually just a small, insulated stakeholder group. You might have been dealing with, say, a single VP who held the budget and then eventually a procurement officer just to handle the paperwork.
Yeah, the products were easier to tell apart.
Right. The differentiation was clearer. But the most crucial factor was really the risk profile. The cost of making the wrong purchasing decision back then was relatively low.
Like if a company bought a subpar software tool.
Or hired the wrong vendor, yeah. It was an operational annoyance. It was not an existential threat to the business or to the buyer's career.
But contrast that dynamic with the enterprise environment you're trying to navigate today. The whole concept of a single decision maker is essentially a myth now.
Oh, completely dead.
The buying group has just exploded in size and scope. You aren't just selling a solution to a VP of sales or marketing anymore. You are sitting across a virtual table from this deeply skeptical committee.
And everyone has a different agenda.
Right. You have finance scrutinizing the payback period. Information security is running penetration tests and demanding compliance audits. Legal is, redlining all the liability clauses.
Operations wants a zero downtime implementation plan.
Exactly. Every single individual on that committee brings a completely different and often competing definition of value.
And they bring competing definitions of risk, which is huge. Decisions are scrutinized at this microscopic level now because the consequences of failure are basically catastrophic.
Right. It's not just an annoyance anymore.
Exactly. If a CIO signs off on a multi-million-dollar digital transformation project and it fails to integrate with their legacy systems, it is a career-ending event. It impacts the company's stock price.
Wow.
Because of that extreme fear and structural complexity, deals absolutely do not progress through momentum anymore. You cannot just build a good relationship with one champion, push the deal down a hill, and expect it to just roll across the finish line.
Yeah, gravity doesn't work for sales anymore.
No, it doesn't. Deals today only progress through deliberate, engineered alignment across that entire disparate committee.
So if we accept that premise, that momentum is dead and alignment is required, it forces a very uncomfortable question.
It does.
If you are managing a revenue team right now, you are probably looking at your metrics and wondering, okay, if my team is working harder than ever, running more meetings, utilizing 20 different software tools, and lagging massive amounts of data into the CRM.
Why are deals still stalling at the 1-yard line?
Yes. Why is the pipeline bloated with opportunities that never close? Why do forecasts just crumble in the final 2 weeks of the quarter?
Well, the uncomfortable truth embedded in this research is that effort no longer correlates with progress. The industry is experiencing this really painful wake-up call because sellers are operating at an incredibly high velocity, but they are applying a momentum-based playbook to an alignment-based environment.
So just running fast in the wrong direction.
Exactly. You can execute a flawless presentation for the VP of engineering, log a dozen activities in your CRM, and feel like you are advancing the deal. But if you fail to uncover that, say the CFO has quietly frozen all new software budgets until Q3, your effort is completely meaningless.
You're just generating noise at that point.
Right. You're gathering data, but you aren't translating it into a coordinated, multi-threaded strategy. Alignment in a complex organization is never accidental. It has to be constructed deliberately.
And that construction requires a vital modern commodity, which is actionable insights that actually dictate your next move.
Absolutely.
Which means we need to pinpoint exactly where that translation from effort to insight is breaking down. If raw effort isn't the bottleneck, and if a lack of overarching strategy isn't the issue, because let's face it, most enterprise companies have brilliant strategy.
Oh, gorgeous strategies.
Right. So where are these deals actually dying? The research defines this specific failure point as the execution gap.
It's an incredibly precise term. The execution gap is the void between what revenue leaders intend to happen and what actually materializes in the daily workflow of the sales team.
Right.
Consider how a strategy typically behaves in a corporate environment. It's usually birthed during some executive offsite. It's this pristine, logically sound slide deck. It maps to macroeconomic trends, outlines ideal customer profiles, defines clear value propositions.
But the moment that strategy leaves the executive suite and gets pushed down into the field, the fragmentation begins. It functions exactly like a high-stakes game of telephone.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
Right. You start with this cohesive, nuanced revenue strategy, whispered by the CEO.
Yeah.
It gets passed to the CRO, who translates it into quotas, then to regional directors, who translate it into territory plans.
And it just keeps degrading.
Exactly. By the time it reaches the individual account executive who is just staring down a quoted deadline and a pipeline deficit, the strategy is dissolved into a series of disconnected, panicked actions.
Yeah, the seller interprets the value proposition one way, the frontline manager coaches it a different way.
And the moment the pressure turns up at the end of the quarter, the seller just abandons the new strategy entirely. They revert to whatever comfortable habits got them promoted in the first place.
Right. The telephone analogy is very accurate, but we have to look closely at what that failure actually looks like on the ground. Because when people hear execution gap, they often picture a massive, catastrophic mistake.
Like a seller completely insulting a prospect.
Or a product demo crashing spectacularly. But that's just a theatrical version of sales. In reality, the execution gap is a slow death by 1,000 microscopic failures.
Interesting. Like what?
It is a planning call where a junior IT stakeholder was mentioned, but the seller failed to map them in the CRM and just never engaged them.
Oh, I've seen that happen.
Or it's a known risk, perhaps an incumbent competitor offering a massive discount that was identified in month 2 of the deal cycle, but ignored because the seller felt they had happy ears and a good rapport with their primary champion.
Right, they just got comfortable.
Exactly. Or it's an opportunity advancing from discovery to proposal in the pipeline, even though no consensus was ever built among the actual buying committee.
So those microscopic failures just quietly accumulate beneath the surface until the deal eventually collapses under its own unaddressed risk, or the quarter ends and the forecast is exposed as a complete fiction.
Yep.
This exposes a massive paradigm shift for the industry. Organizations are finally looking at these bloated pipelines and realizing, hey, we don't have a strategy problem, we have an execution problem.
Precisely. Strategy, no matter how brilliant, simply does not scale on its own. You can't hand out a 40-page playbook and expect 1,000 different sellers to flawlessly interpret, adapt, and apply it in real time across 1,000 entirely unique, deeply complex enterprise deals.
Right, the variables are just too high.
Yeah. I mean, your top 5% of performers might do it intuitively. They possess the business acumen to naturally anticipate risks and build those multi-threaded relationships. But you cannot build a predictable, publicly traded business model by relying solely on the intuition of a few elite soloists.
No, strategy doesn't scale. Execution systems do.
Exactly.
Historically, the industry has attempted to build systems to fix this fragmentation. The dominant answer for decades has been account planning. And, we should acknowledge Altify's foundational role in this space.
Right. The research shows Altify essentially pioneered the digital account planning methodology.
It was designed to pull teams out of that chaotic reactive cycle, where they just wait for an RFP to drop and chase whatever moves and shift them toward deliberate, proactive, account-centric engagement.
It was absolutely necessary infrastructure. Account planning provided a framework. It forced teams to pause, pull up the org chart, map out the political influence of different stakeholders, and identify specific white space or paths to growth within those massive enterprise accounts.
It made the invisible dynamics of an account visible for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the theory, but if you have ever been an individual contributor, you know the stark reality of traditional account planning.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Right. Isn't an account plan typically just a highly engineered, static document? You get the whole account team into a conference room in January. You spend 3 hours doing a massive whiteboard brainstorm. You build this beautifully color-coded account plan.
It looks great on the whiteboard.
It looks amazing. And then, the very second the meeting ends and the real selling begins, that document gets shoved into a Google Drive folder and is never looked at again until management demands an update in Q3. It functions as a compliance exercise for leadership, not a living tool for the seller.
You're touching on the exact friction point that sparked the evolution we are discussing. An account plan is essentially a map. Having a map is critical, but a map doesn't drive the car. And a map doesn't update itself when a bridge is out. For a strategy to possess actual economic value, it cannot just live in a slide deck or some static CRM field that is only reviewed during quarterly business reviews.
It has to be actionable.
It must be actively present in the exact fleeting moments where deals are shaped and decisions are made on a daily basis. The realization that strategy requires continuous scalable application in the workflow is what drives the evolutionary leap from traditional account planning to strategic revenue execution.
So let's dissect that evolutionary leap. What does strategic revenue execution actually look like under the hood? This brings us to the core of the deep dive. The research makes it incredibly clear what SRE is not.
Very true.
It is not a new analytics dashboard for the CRO to stare at. It is not a standalone software application that sellers have to alt-tab into. And it is certainly not a new sales methodology that requires flying everyone to a 3-day boot camp. SRE is defined as a completely new operating model.
It is a structural rewiring of how a revenue organization functions. The research breaks SRE down into 3 specific interconnected capabilities.
Okay, let's go through them.
The first capability is define strategy. This is the evolution of account planning. It is the process of translating high-level organizational goals into highly structured, actionable plans for specific accounts and opportunities. You are still mapping stakeholders and uncovering white space, but that map is now digitized and dynamic.
Makes sense. The second capability is embed methodology. And this is where the theoretical becomes practical. This means taking your chosen sales methodology, whether that is Metadata, Challenger, or something completely proprietary, and hard-coding those best practices directly into the seller's workflow.
Right, so the methodology doesn't live in a training binder. It lives inside the CRM screens the seller looks at every single day.
Okay, and the third capability is guide execution with AI. Now, I have to challenge this.
Sure.
Every single SaaS company on earth has slapped the letters AI onto their homepage. If we're just talking about an AI that, transcribes a Zoom call and writes a generic follow-up email, that is not going to close a complex enterprise deal. How is this AI actually functioning as an execution engine?
Well, if it were just generative text, your skepticism would be entirely justified. But the AI in the SRE model is not a passive observer or a simple text generator. It is an active, deterministic participant in the deal cycle.
Deterministic how?
It is analyzing the structural data of the deal against the embedded methodology. It looks at the stakeholder map, it looks at the velocity of the opportunity, it looks at the risk factors you've logged, and it actively surfaces guidance on what to do next. It shifts the AI from summarize what just happened to prescribe what needs to happen right now.
Okay, walk me through a concrete scenario. Take me to the spaces between the pipeline reviews. The pipeline review with a manager is a manufactured moment of execution. But what happens to a seller on a random Wednesday afternoon?
The Wednesday afternoon scenario.
Yeah. They are staring at a pipeline of 40 active deals. They have 2 hours of deep work time, and they have to decide what to do. How does the SRE model actually manifest in that exact moment?
That Wednesday afternoon scenario is exactly where deals are won or lost. In a traditional model, the seller relies on gut instinct. They look at their pipeline, Pick the deal with the highest dollar value and send an email to their main contact asking for an update.
Which is not strategy, that is just hope.
Exactly. In the SRE model, the seller opens their CRM and the execution engine has already analyzed those 40 deals. It flags a specific high-value opportunity. It tells the seller, based on the embedded methodology, this deal has been in the proposal stage for 18 days. You have mapped the technical buyer, but you have zero recorded engagement with the economic buyer.
Oh, wow. That's specific.
Right, and furthermore, the AI has detected a structural risk because the competitor you are up against historically drops their price at this specific stage.
So it's anticipating the competitor's move.
Yes. The system doesn't just present the problem, it prescribes the action. It surfaces the exact messaging framework needed to reach out to the economic buyer and outflank the competitor's pricing trap. SRE connects the macro strategy to the micro workflow. It ensures that the hundreds of micro decisions a seller makes on a Wednesday afternoon are visible, measurable, and repeatable.
That completely changes the dynamic.
Yeah.
It means you are no longer crossing your fingers and hoping the middle 60% of your sales team can magically develop the intuition of a 20-year enterprise veteran. You are systemizing that intuition.
Precisely.
So why hasn't the industry already solved this? I mean, most organizations have a strategy. They bought a methodology. They have various AI tools. Why are they still failing to execute?
Because those elements exist in entirely isolated silos. Strategy lives in the executive suite. Methodology is owned by the sales enablement team, and it lives in some learning management software. AI is usually a separate third-party tool sitting on top of the tech stack. The organization purchases all these disparate components and then places the burden entirely on the individual seller to manually weave them together.
All while simultaneously trying to hit quota.
Exactly. It is an impossible cognitive load. SRE works because it collapses those silos into a single workflow.
I am picturing a symphony orchestra. You can have a group of incredibly talented elite musicians, but if they're all isolated in different soundproof rooms, the violinist is playing classical, the saxophonist is playing jazz, and the percussionist is just banging out a rock beat. You don't have music.
No, you just have expensive noise.
Right. SRE acts as the conductor. The strategy is the sheet music. The methodology is the instruments. And the AI is the conductor reading the room and setting the exact tempo. It integrates everything into a coordinated performance.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. And if we look at the specific whiteboard data provided in the Altify research, it maps out exactly how this orchestration functions across 5 distinct pillars.
Okay, what are the 5?
First, every single action a seller takes connects back to the overarching strategy. There are no more random acts of selling. If an action doesn't align with the account plan, it doesn't happen.
Makes sense.
Second, SRE dictates who they engage. It is based on stakeholder influence, political alignment, and identifying the true power base within an organization, rather than just talking to the friendliest person who answers the phone.
Which prevents you from wasting weeks negotiating with someone who doesn't even have the authority to sign a contract.
Exactly. Third, the system guides when they engage. This is where the AI tempo comes in. It analyzes risk signals and deal progression to tell you when an opportunity is losing momentum, allowing you to act before the deal goes dark.
So proactive instead of reactive.
Yes. Fourth, it guides how they position value. Instead of just pitching a generic list of product features, the methodology ensures you are aligning your solution directly with the specific business outcomes that the CFO or the CIO actually cares about.
Connecting the dots for them.
Right. And finally, it dictates where they focus. Sellers have limited time. SRE ensures they apply that time based on verified opportunity potential, not just geographical convenience or whoever emailed them last.
Which brings us back to the ultimate question of, well, why now? Why is this shift from account planning to strategic revenue execution so urgent today?
It's because execution has become the final true differentiator in the enterprise landscape. We operate in a reality where insight alone no longer guarantees an outcome. Your competitors have access to the exact same macroeconomic data.
They have sophisticated CRMs.
They are deploying generative AI. When everyone possesses the same data, the winner is simply the organization that can translate those insights into disciplined, consistent, coordinated action across their entire revenue team.
It fundamentally redefines what it means to be a modern sales organization. The era of activity for activity's sake is over. Rewarding your team for doing more of the wrong things faster is a guaranteed recipe for burnout and blown forecasts.
Totally unsustainable.
Modern enterprise sales requires you to take that pristine strategy out of the executive slide deck and operationalize it directly into the CRM workflow, such as inside Salesforce. And the research provided by Altify maps out exactly how this unified system of platform methodology and execution services achieves that.
It moves a business away from a fragile reliance on isolated pockets of excellence. You know, those few hero sellers who drag the company across the finish line every quarter and builds a resilient, predictable machine capable of consistent execution at scale.
Which leaves you with a critical, perhaps uncomfortable thought to examine within your own organization. As artificial intelligence continues to evolve at an exponential rate, it is going to inevitably equalize access to raw data, market signals, and basic insights for every single competitor in your space.
The playing field will be leveled.
Exactly. Within a few years, knowing what is happening in an account will offer absolutely zero competitive advantage because everyone will know. When that day arrives and the data playing field is completely level, will your organization's ultimate and perhaps only remaining moat be the disciplined, systemic rhythm of your execution? The gap between strategy and execution is where millions of dollars in enterprise deals quietly die every quarter. Closing that gap isn't just about efficiency. It is how you survive.
It is the defining challenge for the next decade of enterprise revenue.
If you want to explore the mechanics of how organizations are actively turning static strategy into disciplined daily execution across every deal and every account, you can dig into the resources at altify.com. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, the market didn't just get harder, it became infinitely more complex. And you cannot brute force your way through complexity. You need a system designed to execute. See you next time.